Beards and Flix, baby.
Guys, welcome to the first official episode of Beards and Flix.
So excited.
We're really excited because we've been talking to a lot of our friends who have given us some wonderful feedback from the first episode, which was the introductory episode. It wasn't even what this show is going to be. It was, people gave us some really good feedback on our rapport with each other and could really hear our friendship coming through.
Yeah, my sister, she said she could tell how comfortable we were.
Yes.
And it made her feel comfortable listening, which is great.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's what we want. So guys, thank you again for joining us. And so what we wanted to do this time is we wanted to start a little bit differently. And Mike wanted to present something at the top of this podcast. So here we go.
So I was talking to a friend of mine Tuesday, ironically about the new PS5 release.
The PlayStation 5?
Yes, that if you didn't get one, wait till March now.
I didn't get one because I'm an Xbox player.
Oh, that sucks. Well, pre-orders sold out in minutes because retailers jumped the gun.
Wow.
Sony said Thursday. Retailers said, screw that, we're going to do it Wednesday. I stayed up till 3 in the morning Wednesday.
Wow.
Pushing the place order button for an hour and a half until my order went through.
Wow.
And so I secured one.
Okay.
But anyway, so I'm talking to a friend of mine about that. And then he mentions, hey, did you hear about the new Academy Award inclusion for Best Picture nomination? I said, no. So he's like, look into it. It's something I think you guys should talk about in the podcast. He thought it would be a polarizing topic.
Yeah.
So I read a couple of articles. First one was the LA Times. Didn't give me a lot of details in terms of the standard or the new rules. Went to Variety, which of course is the number one industry source, I think. You sent me a lot of articles from Variety.
Yeah, Variety has a lot of good information
Yeah.
on the film industry.
Right. And so what happens is, starting I think 2023 for the Oscars, in order for your film to be nominated as Best Picture, you have to meet two of these four new criteria. So there's four standards. You have to meet two of the four to be nominated. I'm going to read off just a couple of those standards in this article. So there's A, B, C, and D. Each one has A1, A2, B1, B2. So there's really four.
Yeah.
But you have to meet two of the four letters.
Okay.
So standard A, on-screen representation, themes, and narratives. To achieve standard A, the film must meet one of the following criteria. A1, lead or significant supporting actors from this underrepresented group: Asian, Hispanic, Latino, Black, African American, Indigenous, Native American, Alaskan and Native, Middle Eastern, North African, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, or other underrepresented race or ethnicity, and anyone also in the LGBTQ community. A2 is general ensemble cast. At least 30% of all actors in secondary and more minor roles are from at least two of the following underrepresented groups that I just mentioned. A3, main storyline subject matter. The main storyline's themes or narrative of the film is centered on an unrepresented group. And it just kind of goes on and on about just different departments where you have to have basically this many numbers of this underrepresented group in order to be considered. So you have to meet two of the four categories. When I first heard about it, I thought, oh, cool. You know, Hollywood and the Academy, and specifically, is trying to bring more inclusion and awareness to these underrepresented groups, which I thought was a cool idea. Until I read the article, read a couple of comments, there's been a lot of backlash, but there's also been a lot of support. The support has come from more of the film industry side. Yep. If you believe what the board members have said, a lot of the backlash has come more from the audience viewer side. I personally think this is just, it's just a participation award type thing.
Really?
When I read 30%, I mean, our fight, even with what's happening in the streets and protests because of the social and racial injustice, our fights for equality, equal opportunities.
Right.
30% is not equal.
Right.
So that means 70% goes elsewhere, presumably to whites, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, can we say that it's a good start?
it's a great start.
Okay.
It's a great start. It's a great template for something that can happen further down the line. It's a good conversation starter. So I'm happy about that. I just don't like how did you decide 30%?
Yeah.
Like, how did that number come up? Why not 40? Why not 50?
Right.
How is that going to change the narrative of these movies that we're going to see?
That's true.
For these Best Picture noms.
That's true. Now, they're not starting until 2023.
Yeah, that's probably because, COVID is shut down.
Are we going to even see the Oscars in a few months?
Doubt it.
For next year?
I know they've done some awards the last couple of months, like virtual.
Right.
But something like that, I mean, you could do virtual.
Right.
They're doing everything else that way.
Right.
It just wouldn't have the same effect. And I've never really put a lot of stock into the Oscars. It's just basically get dressed up in your fanciest attire and let's make play fun with each other. So
I actually really enjoy watching the Oscars.
Yeah.
I love award season. I love the beginning of the year when all that's coming on and stuff. All of the the BAFTA awards and the Spirit Awards, all the different ones that are around.
Now the minor award shows, I love those.
Yeah, and it's mainly just because I just want to see the actors that I love watching in the movies.
Right.
Interacting with each other or whatever from different films. It's just fun to watch. We used to have Oscar parties back in the day.
I've heard people do that.
Yeah, it's just fun. Yeah,
I would love to be a part of one. just to get dressed up, rent a tux.
I haven't had one in a while, and therefore you haven't been invited in a while.
Right.
And because they're probably not going to do the Oscars because there hasn't been any movies released this year, or not very many.
If they did it, Tenet would definitely win.
Right.
Best picture at this point.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. They're probably not going to have it.
Right. I mean, I would totally think that Tenet was going to win, or it will win, or whatever. So again, we have a lot to get to in this episode. We're mainly focusing on Die Hard with a Vengeance, the 1995 Bruce Willis, John McTiernan directed release. Let's talk about
why we're even doing this movie first.
Why are we doing this movie first?
Because today, if you know the film very well, today is Jeremy Irons' birthday.
Okay.
Who plays the main villain in this movie, Simon Gruber.
Simon Gruber.
Yeah.
Who is the brother of Hans Gruber, who took a
swan dive.
Big. Well, I mean, he was thrown. He was, Hans was reaching for Holly.
Right. John's wife. Yeah.
And he had that watch on.
Yep.
And they, dismantled the watch, and then Hans falls.
That's it.
To his death.
It's an iconic death because it's in slow-mo.
Iconic death.
It's pretty cool to see.
It's been spoofed a few times. I think Brooklyn Nine-Nine, did it on a couple of their things. That was really funny. Love that show. So Die Hard with a Vengeance. It's my favorite of the Die Hard movies. I used to say it was my favorite of the Die Hard trilogy because the third one came out and there was a large lapse in time between 1995 and the next release, which was like, what,
2007.
7 was when Live Free or Die Hard came out.
So that's 12 years.
Which was a pretty good movie, too. I enjoyed it, and it included Justin Long.
So another team up.
Justin Long, a comedic actor, really, really good comedic actor. I think he's really funny. So Die Hard with a Vengeance, my favorite of the series, and why is it my favorite? When I was, this came out in 1995. I graduated high school in 1999. So I grew up in a family where we didn't really watch a lot of R-rated movies. I wasn't really allowed to watch a lot of R-rated movies. So when I became of age, which was about 17, 18, I literally would go, I was graduated from high school, still living at mom and dad's. I was working. I would go to Hastings or Blockbuster, which two stores that don't exist anymore.
Right.
And I would literally grab like 3 or 4 DVDs of movies that I wasn't allowed to watch when I was younger, and I would just like get as much as I could and watch them and take them all in.
Because you're making up for lost time.
Making up for lost time and just watching these movies, and they became some of my favorite movies to this day. So this is one of those movies. I rented this DVD over and over, and I just love watching it. Mom and Dad were asleep in their bedroom, and I was in the living room at like midnight or 1 a.m. watching these movies.
Yeah.
This movie. So
wait, how old were you?
Let's see, 90. I don't think I didn't see it when it came out in 95.
Okay.
I didn't see it probably until 98.
So you were
or so
17 or
so it would have been
there?
around 17. The age that you can watch R-rated movies, right? I think that is a little kind of a lost thing. I don't think people. I think some children may be watching these movies prematurely.
For sure.
But there's different schools of thought on that subject,
right?
And we're not really going to talk about that today. What does this movie do to you? What does this movie? How does this make you feel?
It's a comfort movie, but it's not one of my top list go-tos. But it's on the list for sure. I'd say maybe top 25 go-to movies if I had to make a list and pick a number. It's John McClane, which to me is Bruce Willis's most iconic role.
John McClane.
And it's a role that he wasn't initially wanted for this role in this first Die Hard. They
Yeah.
wanted somebody else.
Yeah.
And then, 3 movies later, we get this, and he's just classic John McClane. He's just kind of riding in that lane. He's so comfortable in this role.
Right.
That his wisecracks, his one line, his quips,
man.
I mean, they're so good.
We're going to get into this more later, but one of my favorite lines from the movie is when they're driving in the car through the park, and they're in the taxi cab, and they're driving through the park.
This takes place in New York, so they're driving through Central
Yeah.
Park.
Yes. And Samuel L. Jackson's character says, "Are you trying to hit these people?" and John McClane says, "No, I'm not." Well, maybe that mime. That's my favorite line from the movie.
It's a really good line.
I love that line. We'll get into more of that later. I want to say that the cinematic atmosphere during 1995, can we just talk about the onslaught of movies that came out in 1995 that are huge?
I feel like we have to.
We have to list them. And here we go. Okay, so 1995, we're just going to go through a couple of these releases that came out in 1995. Ready? Waterworld.
Can you say that's a big movie, though?
Waterworld. Kevin Costner in this post-apocalyptic world that is now, the ice caps melted and it's just water everywhere.
And they're riding jet skis,
And they're riding
right?
jet skis.
Yeah.
And there's a big nod to the Exxon Valdez ship. That was a big disaster. Braveheart. Mel Gibson's passion project before the passion came out.
Right. The Passion before the Passion.
Directed by Mel Gibson,
Yep.
starring Mel Gibson. Gigantic movie. Another movie that I watched a lot when I was a kid because I would stay home and rent, Braveheart. Batman Forever
That's right.
came out in 1995, which was a pretty big movie at the time.
You know what? When I think of that movie, I think the Seal's Kiss from a Rose became bigger than the movie itself.
Yeah.
That was a big song that year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's still a big song.
Yeah.
That's a major song. That was a really good soundtrack. So some more movies that came out that year: GoldenEye,
You're right.
007.
Was that Pierce
That
Brosnan's
was
first Bond?
I think it was his
Yeah.
first role because he played Bond several times.
Mm-hmm.
That was a pretty big one, which also became a very big video game for the N64.
64, yep.
That game was one of the first great first-person shooter games that everyone played.
Agreed.
Right? There was a bunch of computer futuristic movies that came out. In fact, there were 3 of them. Okay?
I think I know where you're going with this.
There was one with Sandra Bullock called The Net,
The Net.
in 1995. There was one of my favorite movies of all time, Hackers. Angelina Jolie.
With the pixie cut.
Yep. And it was a movie about these hackers that have gone around and they have this big crew and does not hold up. If you
Right.
go back and watch Hackers to this
Right.
day, the all of these CG and the graphics they use to show getting on the internet and stuff,
Yeah.
it looks really bad if you look at it again. Johnny Mnemonic, a Keanu Reeves vehicle that was also a futuristic, computerized type movie.
It was a weird movie.
Do you remember Johnny Mnemonic?
Yeah, slightly. It was a
Yeah.
really weird movie.
Yeah. He was also in A Walk in the Clouds,
Which I
Keanu
never saw,
Reeves,
yeah.
which I never saw either, because that would be one of those. However, Seven came out in 1995.
Right.
Brad
Right.
Pitt, Morgan Freeman. Oh my gosh, we are probably going to cover that movie.
7 is so good.
Because I literally remember going to high school and somebody saying, "Hey, have you seen Seven?" And I was like, "No." And I didn't see it for a few more years.
Right.
And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this movie is groundbreaking. It's huge."
I love it. I have the DVD version of it.
That's awesome. 12 Monkeys, another Bruce Willis vehicle, came out that year.
So you had Bruce Willis and Brad Pitt, 2 movies in the same year.
Yeah, that's right. Billy Madison.
Yeah, it's at the top of
Came
my
out
list.
in
I found that one
1995.
first. Yeah.
Yeah. Read some from your list.
Okay, I've got Bad Boys, the first one.
The first Bad Boys.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that movie's
Yeah.
great. I love that movie.
So we're talking about all these massive movies the same year as Die Hard with a Vengeance comes out.
Massive team-up movies.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So Will Smith.
And Martin Lawrence. And 12 Monkeys, you got Brad Pitt, Bruce Willis. So all the star power.
Yep.
Crimson Tide, you got Denzel Washington and Gene Hackman going head to head.
2 powerhouse actors.
And at the time, Gene Hackman was probably at the height of his, notoriety.
Yeah, Gene Hackman had done a lot of things leading up to that movie. Denzel was relatively new to big screen
Right.
in this time because he had transitioned from television acting to big screen acting probably just a few years before.
I believe so.
In the early 90s, because he was on that hospital show that I didn't watch because I was too young.
St.
Elmo's Fire?
Thank you.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
A big movie for me in 1995 was Empire Records. Really big 90s rock film. Okay, like a whole bunch of like punk rock and rock and roll kids working for a record store that's going to get shut down. It's a pretty good movie.
I've got one for you. I've actually got two. Apollo 13.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That Ron Howard directed, Tom Hanks.
Kevin Bacon.
Huge movie.
You got 3 or 4 huge actors in that time period, all in the same movie.
Based on a true story.
Yep.
Wonderful film. Really, really groundbreaking. And I use that word a lot, but it really was. Because like these movies that came out this year are very important to me.
I agree.
I saw them a lot of times on DVD. I would return to them, later in life and watch them again. And I mean, movies that are that big, like Apollo 13, based on a true story, the storytelling was great. You know, it was huge for American history.
Right.
You know, the actual space shuttle story behind that. What else?
Toy Story, the first one. Tom Hanks again.
That was 1995?
That was 95, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't believe it either. I've got one of my favorites because it's one of my favorite directors, Heat.
Oh,
another team of Pacino against De Niro.
Man, I remember Dad rented that. It was a double VHS.
Yeah, it's a long movie.
It's a very long movie. I remember Dad allowing me to watch that with him. And how much I had never seen a movie like that before.
Wow.
So, I was 16 or so, and Dad rented Heat. And it was double VHS, right?
Hilarious.
Because it's like, VHSs only hold 2 hours. I think the movie was 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Mann directed, which is your favorite director.
The reason why I want to pursue filmmaking.
So why is he your favorite director?
So he puts these 2 characters against each other. Or he finds a way to get 2 characters or actors you would never think of and put them together. We hadn't seen De Niro and Pacino in a film together until this point.
Oh man!
And they had like a long catalog of films that were big hits, cult classics.
Right.
And we finally get these guys together. But what Michael Mann does is he can take the setting, wherever the city is, and make it its own character. This is shot in L.A. He loves to shoot in L.A. He shot Collateral in L.A., which is my favorite movie of all time.
Yep.
Miami Vice is in, obviously, Miami, but they do go over to South America as well.
Okay.
But he knows how to shoot these environments and make them its own separate character. You want to be there because the way he shoots digital.
So I was going to talk about that. So in the beginning, he, of course, Heat is not filmed in digital. Heat is filmed in 35 millimeter.
Right.
But he was one of the first big directors to choose to go to the digital route when digital became a really good platform.
Collateral was his first film he shot digital. And the reason why is because Collateral takes place all at night.
Right.
So if you shoot digitally, for people who don't know, you can pick up the dark spots better. You can see more light in the dark if you shoot digital.
Right.
And from that point forward, every movie he shot after, he's shot digital. So he was like he paved the way for shooting cinematically in a different way that hadn't been used before.
Yep. Collateral. One of my favorite movies in 1995 that came out, Tommy Boy. Chris Farley, rest his soul.
Yes.
David Spade, one of another great team-up movies.
Both SNL guys, right?
Both SNL guys. This had been... I just listened to the Rewatchables episode about this movie.
Okay.
And they cover it really well. So we're not going to do that right now. But wonderful movie. I love that movie. Return to it a lot. You going to talk about Friday?
Oh my gosh! How do I leave that off of the list? I'm embarrassed. I apologize, listeners. I should have had that on my list. Brad's gonna tell me about it. It's a classic movie.
Man, I had a friend just say, "Hey, rent Friday and watch it."
Okay.
I don't remember who told me that. Just one of my friends. And I did, and I watched it with my sister, and we laughed and laughed. We had never seen a comedy like that before. Let's just go ahead and talk about it. This was something that white people didn't watch.
Right.
You know, this was a African American comedy about African American things that we didn't understand.
It's just about a day in the life of somebody who lives in the hood.
Right, and we completely didn't understand it. And this movie was one of the first things that helped me begin to understand the difference between my life and that life.
Right.
So done in an incredible way, acted incredibly, really funny.
Hilarious.
Just laugh out loud moments before LOL was even a thing.
Right.
Do you do that? Let me ask you a question. When you're watching a movie by yourself and you've seen the movie a million times, do you laugh at the moments that you always laugh at out loud? Are you sitting there just chuckling to yourself?
It depends.
Even though you've heard the joke a million times?
Some of the moments, because like you've seen it enough times, you know it's coming up, right?
Yeah.
So you're kind of prepared to hear it.
Yeah.
And you know it's one of your favorite lines because it's funny to you.
Right.
So sometimes I do. Sometimes I'll just kind of chuckle to myself. And if I happen to laugh out loud for real on something I've seen a million times, I'll kind of look around the room like, oh, it's just me. And then I feel embarrassed and I have to pause and like regroup.
I absolutely love laughing. I
Yeah.
think laughing is one of the most important things we
You
can
laugh
do
a lot,
in
which is
life.
good,
I
yeah.
love laughing. I am sitting at home alone. I'm watching Die Hard with a Vengeance. I watched it Thursday night.
Same.
This is Saturday, so a couple nights ago. I got off work, went and picked up some Chinese food, went home and watched Die Hard with a Vengeance. And there's so many funny moments, and I literally laughed out loud in my apartment by myself.
I can see
And
it.
I just love it, man. It's just so fun.
It's one of those movies you can laugh all
Right.
the way through, pretty much to the end. Like I
Right.
said, because John McClane is so good at these one-liners.
John
You know what I
McClane.
love about this movie?
What do you love about this movie?
Compared to the other Die Hards, the previous and after this one. So in the beginning, they have to find McClane.
Yeah.
Because this terrorist is like, find McClane, otherwise I'm going to set off another bomb.
Yes.
Right? So when they first show him, he's hungover. And he's suspended.
So watching this as a 17-year-old, I didn't understand what hungover meant.
Right.
Okay? Here I am, 39 years old, and I'm actually a little hungover right now because I went to Truvine last night and met a bunch of friends and had a few beers, and I completely understand knowing what that feels like.
Same.
Right?
Same. It's worse than death.
And the older I get, the worse it is. The longer it takes to recover.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
But if you think about it, watching this movie, because I'm thinking about he's hungover
Yep.
this entire time.
Yep.
He's got to save the world hungover.
right, because this probably takes place over a few days.
No, actually, it's shorter than that.
Is it just,
It's just
Like
a day and a half, I believe.
day and a half.
Yeah, or maybe the same day.
okay.
So
36 hours.
We find John McClane at the beginning of this basically kicked to the curb.
Yes.
Nobody really cares what he did in the first Die Hard.
It had been a long time since we'd seen him because this was 95. Die Hard 2 came out in 1990, and it wasn't great. It's where it takes place in an airport.
Right.
There's some fun moments, but it's not. I don't watch Die Hard 2 very much.
Same, I don't either.
I go to the first, I go to the third, and then on, and maybe the fourth, and that's really it. I don't really like the one with his son.
That was the worst one.
A Good Day to Die Hard.
That's what it is. I couldn't think of the title. It's so bad.
You know, it's got Jai Courtney in it, who was at the time up and coming actor.
I feel like all these years later, he's still up and coming.
Right.
he just can't get over the hump.
He's continuously up and coming.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go back to your point. It's the beginning of the movie.
But he's hungover, and as I'm watching this, there's certain moments in the film where you look at him, he legit looks hungover. Like
Yeah.
his eyes look darker.
You get it, yeah.
Yeah. He just looks rough, and he's kicked to the curb, and his colleagues, they have to go pick him up, round him up, get him sobered up enough to complete these tasks, right? And they're just talking trash about him, like he's just the
Right.
scum of the earth. Him and Holly, his wife, are having
Right.
issues. She's still in L.A. This is in New York.
Right. This is let's talk about that. This is the first in the franchise where he's back in New York.
Yeah.
Because the first movie was in Los Angeles.
Right.
The second movie is in Virginia somewhere.
Okay, right.
And this is back in New York where he is a cop.
He's a city cop.
Right. So he's
But
back on his force.
This is something I wanted to ask you because it was never made clear. He was suspended in the beginning of this movie. They had to go find him. They had to give him his badge. They never explained why he was suspended. If they did, I didn't catch it.
You know, you're right. I don't remember a reason, and they kind of allude to it, but they don't really explain it.
Yeah. I mean, they
So
talk about how
that's-
he's suspended, but then they basically just go on to continue to verbally bash him over and over.
Right.
And I'm thinking to myself, I'm hungover. You want me to save the world, and you're gonna bash me? I don't want
Yeah.
any part of this.
Yeah.
If it was me, but they never allude to it. But if you think about the character John McClane,
Yeah.
and his personality, it would be easy to see why he would be suspended
He doesn't follow the rules
at all. He's a
He
lone
doesn't
wolf.
play by the book.
No.
He's a lone wolf. He doesn't really work with anybody else. You know, in the movies, you see him tackling these villains and their crews,
Right.
the bad guys, all by himself. Typically in a wife beater,
Yes.
in a white tank top. You know,
And one Beretta.
and one Beretta with like only a few bullets. You know, he gets. This is something my dad always talked about when I was watching it with him growing up. My dad would talk about how he always gets so bloody.
He gets beat up every
He
time.
gets so bloody in these movies.
He's the worst fighter.
But he ends up winning.
He's resilient.
He's resilient.
And that's why I love that they shot this in New York, because when you think of New York, you think resiliency.
Yeah, he never gives up.
Never gives up.
He always finds a way to overcome, which is cool. So let's talk about the writer for a little bit.
Okay.
You being a writer, do you know
Right.
who wrote this?
I had his name written down. His name is Jonathan Hensley.
Did you look him up?
I did. He also wrote the Nicolas Cage and Jessica Biel film Next.
Okay.
Yeah.
I never saw that movie.
It's all right. It's okay.
Should I?
It's a Saturday night. I'm bored. I'll watch it. It's got some cool
Okay.
concepts with time travel.
It's probably going to be on Netflix forever because it's a B
I think so.
movie-ish,
Yeah,
right?
I think so.
Okay.
The Thomas Jane Punisher wrote that one.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Wrote Armageddon, another Bruce
Okay.
Willis film.
Yep.
The original Jumanji.
Which came out in 1995.
95, yep.
So this year
Yeah.
we're talking about.
He also directed that Punisher movie.
Okay.
Yeah. And he EP'd on Armageddon.
Okay.
So, I mean, big movies.
Yeah, so he's been involved in several things we've seen.
Right.
And they're all great. He actually had a writing credit on the newest Jumanji releases.
That's right, he did. You're right.
So Jonathan Hensley, I think that's how you say his name, or pronounce his name. He was at this time was relatively unknown. I am on IMDb, of course, looking up the
Unusual
writer.
fact-checking source.
And what I go and I do, and as I go back to what came out before Die Hard with a Vengeance, and I like to think about how he was chosen to write this, or did he just maybe he just wrote the screenplay and tried selling it, and it got picked up, and that's that process. So what he had done previously before Die Hard with a Vengeance was the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, which is a TV series that I watched a few episodes. I didn't watch all of them. At the time, it was starring Sean Patrick Flannery,
Oh my gosh.
who was in a lot of '90s movies and TV.
Boondock Saints?
Boondock Saints being one of them. Yeah.
Wow.
Huge movie. Wonderful movie.
And if you think about the young Indiana Jones, it makes sense that he would transition to Die Hard, because Indiana Jones, John McClane are both quippy, wisecracking characters.
Right.
So it kind of makes sense. He's basically writing for the same character. It's a little more amped up in Die Hard.
Right. It's cool. Let's talk about the team up between Samuel L. Jackson and Bruce Willis. What had they done before this movie together?
So what they did before, they weren't paired up in this movie, but they were in Pulp Fiction just the year before,
Mm-hmm.
Quentin Tarantino, which, by the way, is my favorite Tarantino film. Most
Pulp
people
Fiction.
would say maybe Inglourious Bastards
Okay.
or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood,
Another
which is one of
big
his most
team-up.
recent releases. Wasn't really regarded as a good movie by a bunch of my friends.
Right.
I enjoyed it.
We saw it together.
We saw it together.
Yeah.
I thought it was well done. I thought it was cool how he approached the story from a different universe.
Right.
So leading up to Die Hard with a Vengeance, Bruce Willis suggested Samuel L. Jackson for the movie. Jackson was thrilled. He said he's seen the first Die Hard maybe 30 times.
Yeah.
That's the quote by
I mean, who hadn't seen it at least 30 times, right? I mean,
I've seen it now. I've seen it more than that. But in '95, it had just come out in '89. So 30 times is a lot for watching a movie on VHS.
right?
Because
you have to rewind it after it's over.
Because DVDs weren't really a thing
No.
until later.
Now, let me tell you this, because you said that about how Samuel Jackson got the role. Did you also know the part was written for Lawrence Fishburne?
The part was written for Lawrence Fishburne, and he turned it down.
Do you know why he turned it down?
I don't.
So his representatives told him, don't take that role, because if you do, the rest of your career, you'll only be asked to do side characters, not leads.
Okay.
And he asked for more money. He didn't get it also.
Okay, so that's good advice, though.
Yeah, it is.
Because look at his career.
But if you look at his career, I thought that was ironic because he still ended up being side characters.
So he turned down the role, but then he later reconsidered, and Samuel L. Jackson was cast.
Right.
And it was too late.
It was too late.
They were already moving forward. This was the highest-grossing movie worldwide in 1995. What was the box office?
So the budget was $90 million, but they ended up making $366 million.
Man, so 95 having a budget of $90 million, there were a lot of helicopter shots, right?
I noticed that
there
too.
were a lot of crane shots. So that kind of money goes into those big setups.
And New York is one of those cities where it's not cheap to shoot in.
You're right. So they had to shut down a lot of the areas
Right.
to film the explosions and to film that train scene. The subway scene underground.
That was crazy.
Right, that was a
an
pretty
intense scene.
major scene, right?
Right.
There was a lot of practical effects used there. There was some miniatures that they used for that subway being, like rolling through the when it explodes and it rolls through that junction down there.
Right.
Whenever Samuel L. Jackson's like, I need to answer this phone. That scene,
Yeah.
which is one of my favorite scenes.
It's a really intense scene.
Yeah.
Because and it's actually kind of ties into what's happening now out in the world. You've got a white cop
Yep.
with a gun on a black man.
Yep.
His hands are up.
Yep.
It's very reminiscent of Trayvon Martin with his hands up.
It
he gets
is,
shot.
and the cop that has the gun on Samuel L. Jackson,
He's freaking out.
he's like, it looks like he's a brand new cop.
Yeah.
He's breathing heavy. His heart's probably racing.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what to do, and in fact, his voice is quivering. He's
it shakes.
Yeah.
There's a point where he says, "Get him up," 3 or 4 times in the last. He's like, "Get him up!"
Yeah, like
it kind of shakes
voice cracks,
and rises.
right.
Yeah. And the thing about it was, the only thing Samuel L. Jackson's character did, Zeus, is he hops the ticket turnstile.
Right.
And this cop sees him and tracks him down.
So he probably follows him from that moment,
Mm-hmm.
and then Samuel L. Jackson yells at this guy in the subway, which isn't a crime,
No.
right? But it was aggravated, could be aggravated assault or whatever. That's
Right.
what the cop's thinking. I'm
Right.
thinking. So
But it does tie into a bigger issue in this movie that I didn't realize back then. Race is mentioned a lot in this movie.
it really is, and I'm glad you brought that up. So race is a really big topic throughout this film, right? So and tell me some of the interactions that you saw between. It was kind of a flipped script.
Yeah.
Because it was Samuel L. Jackson's character bringing up the race issue to Bruce Willis, who didn't really have an issue
Right.
with race.
Yeah, and I think if I had to guess, I would say the characters probably had some preconceived notions about race. I mean, his store, he's a store owner in Harlem,
Right.
which is a black neighborhood.
Right.
And the opening is there's a white cop out there with the sign,
Yep.
a sandwich board that says "I
Yep.
hate N-words," which we talked about in our opening pod.
Yep.
So he's thinking, okay, here's another crazy white guy trying to start up some trouble. So the interesting thing is there's a scene shortly after John and Zeus are taken to the police station, and the terrorist Simon calls and makes these demands
Right.
that he wants John, and he calls him the Ebony Samaritan.
Yep.
Refers to him as the Ebony Samaritan.
What does Samuel L. Jackson's character say to that?
Oh, what does he say?
You got a problem with Ebony?
With Ebony, yeah.
Which is that attitude he had for the majority of the film.
And you know what? I think that's a very real reaction and response.
Sure. Well, I mean, so Simon specifically brought up that point.
He did.
Right? He said the Ebony Samaritan. So Simon kind of initiated that
He did.
response.
He did.
Right?
But so as that scene ends, Samuel L. Jackson says, "I want to be a part of this. You guys can deal with this." He basically said these are white people problems. I think he does say that.
Yeah.
And so then McClane says, "Why did you save me?"
Yeah.
And his response, Samuel Jackson's
Was
response,
powerful.
Samuel L. Jackson's response was, "I didn't save you. I stopped a white cop from getting killed in Harlem, because if I don't do that, we'll have one white dead cop. Tomorrow we'll have 1,000 white cops with itchy trigger fingers."
Right.
Which I thought was very interesting.
Dude, it's such a good point, because you think about the other things that you've seen in cinema around this time, Boys in the Hood, Friday, where you understand a little bit better what that line means. Right? Because the LA riots were prior to this movie.
Yeah.
What year was that?
That was 92.
Yeah, 92, okay? So race in America was a pretty big subject.
It was.
Things in the news that happening in real life, things on screen that are probably inspired by those things that happen in the news.
And to go onto that line that he says, if you think about it, New Yorkers kind of have the reputation of having really corrupt police, probably the most corrupt department in the nation.
Right.
But if you think about it also, a white cop gets killed in a black neighborhood anywhere, there's gonna be a witch hunt.
Right.
Cops are gonna be out there banging on every door and in every ghetto, trying to find information. They're gonna probably break a million laws trying to get to the bottom of who killed this one white cop. Whereas when a black person gets killed and it's recorded, they don't want to do anything about it.
Right.
You know, Breonna Taylor's, just to talk about this is still current.
Yeah.
Breonna Taylor's murderers are still free, walking the streets.
Yep.
I found out yesterday, her family received $12 million from the state to basically say, we're sorry. The way I took it was, oh, we're sorry, we made a mistake. We're not going to arrest anybody, but here's $12 million.
To be quiet.
Yeah. It's hush money.
Oh my God.
And you can't put a price tag on someone's life. I don't care what it is.
You're right.
So rest in peace, Breonna Taylor.
Right.
You know, prayers to the family that's still dealing with that traumatic experience.
So going back a little bit in the movie, what is the mantra that Samuel L. Jackson talks about? How they do not trust white people.
Right.
And they don't need help from white people.
That's a very real. That's a very real philosophy for a lot of black people who live in impoverished areas.
Right.
To this day, it's still a very.
Right.
If you go across the tracks to North Tyler, which we're very close to, and you ask a couple of black people about that, they'll agree.
Yeah. The older of the two boys walked to the front of the store and he says, "Uncle,
he does
look
say
outside."
Uncle. Right.
And Zeus says, "What is it?" And he says, "It's a white man." Zeus says, "I've seen a white man."
Which is a funny line.
And the kid says, Not like
this. Yep.
And that's when we see the reveal of Bruce Willis wearing the sandwich board just down the street from a big group of like older teenage
black men.
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably 10 or 11 of them.
They're sitting on the stoop.
Sitting on a stoop, which is a really iconic New York thing to do.
Sure.
You sit on stoops and just kick it and hang out.
Have a basketball.
Yeah.
You can hear inside the store, you can hear their boombox.
Right.
Which is a thing of the past.
Wow,
right?
boomboxes, yeah.
So, you think of the iconic movie Say Anything with John Cusack and the boombox on his shoulder.
On his shoulder.
That was a big deal back then in 1995 to have a big boombox and to hear somebody's music playing, throughout the city streets or
Right.
whatever. And so we hear that, and outside is Bruce Willis.
That's still one of the most tense moments for me watching the film, even though I know it's happening.
Yeah.
Because before the big altercation with the group of guys and
Right.
Zeus gets involved, there's an older black woman who walks by and she looks at the sign and you can see the reaction on her face.
Man,
and then you
yeah.
can see the uncomfortableness on his face.
Right.
Because he doesn't want to be there.
No, it's completely offensive to
Yeah.
her, and he knows it is.
Right.
And she's probably just like, what in the world is happening? Why is that man doing that? So let's talk about the introduction of this team up, okay?
Okay.
So right at that moment is when Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson's characters meet. And the writing of how they meet and how immediately Samuel L. Jackson's character, Zeus, wants to help him. He's like
He's trying to de-escalate.
He's trying to de-escalate
because he knows what could
in
happen.
a very intelligent way.
Right.
Because Zeus's character is intelligent.
Yes.
You know that from just seeing him, really.
Right.
He's got glasses. He owns his own
He
store.
owns his store, yeah.
He's telling his nephews this really good advice, or what he thought was really good advice. It may or may not be.
I have
we don't argue about that.
I have the mantra, the line. So he asks Dexter, who I think is the oldest kid, "Now where are you going?" Dexter says, "School." "Why?" "To get educated." "Why?" "So we can go to college." "And why is that important?" "To get respect." Zeus corrects him, "Respect." "Now who's the bad guys?" "Guys who sell drugs." The younger brother. "Guys who have guns." Zeus says. "And who's the good guys?" "We're the good guys." "Who's gonna help you?" "Nobody." "So who's gonna help you?" "We're gonna help ourselves." "And who do we not want to help us?" "White people." Zeus ends it with, "That's right, now get out of here, go to school."
So the group of teenage guys come over, right? They start harassing him verbally, and of course they're offended.
Well, they start off asking Zeus, "Zeus, you know this guy?"
Yeah.
And he says, "You look like I know this guy?"
Yeah, does it look like I know this
Yeah.
guy? And so right before they come over, he tells Bruce Willis to act like he's from Bellevue,
Right.
which you don't really. Zeus alludes to it being a mental hospital, right? I don't know if Bellevue is a real place. I don't know if New York has a mental hospital named Bellevue, but we understood immediately that just act crazy, right?
Yeah.
And Bruce Willis is like, no, this is a police matter.
Yeah, because he gives us some details that you heard about the bomb that went off.
And immediately Zeus knew what he was talking about because he listens to the news.
Right.
And it immediately resounded with him. Oh my gosh, I did hear about that. This is a big
Which is why he's
big
then
deal.
trying to tell him, act like you're crazy to save his life, because he realizes you've got bigger work to do than to be dealing with this.
Yep.
So let me try to get you out of here before those guys down there see you.
Right. And then what happens? Basketball bounces out in the street.
Which is crazy to me. That's just it's a small detail, but you notice it because it's just like, but the whole time the guy's bouncing the ball.
Yep.
Or playing with the ball.
Well, you hear it bouncing.
Yeah.
You may not even see it, but you hear it.
Right.
And then you do see it
Yeah.
later, and then it bounces out in the street. The guy goes and gets the ball. He turns and sees the sign. Has a reaction. We won't say what he said.
Right.
But it's pretty loud.
Very profound and
Very
pretty
profound.
loud. Yes.
Because it's an appropriate reaction to what
It is.
written on the sandwich board.
Without any context and seeing that, you're going to react the way that guy reacts.
Absolutely. So they all come over, right? And it gets pretty intense.
Because they're all around him.
Yeah, I love this is some of the cinematography that I do like. So the cinematographer, his name is Peter Menzies Jr. It was his 4th major film to be a DP on, okay? I alluded to this earlier before we started recording as this being wide shot theater. That is something that some like film goers or even people in the industry refer to as a lot of the master shots were extreme wides.
Right.
And it seems like, because he did this a lot in this movie, there was that 360 camera feel where you have 2 characters in the scene and the camera is going just circling them, circling. That's a really big thing to accomplish.
It is.
Because like if you think about it, whenever you have a camera set up, what's behind the camera is a whole bunch of people, right? With
Film
gear
equipment,
and recording equipment and audio equipment. And so this is probably one of those scenes, and I'm just this is conjecture right now because I don't exactly know how they recorded it, but this is what I think. I think that was all ADR, right? So which stands for automatic dialogue replacement. And when I was in film school, they told me that 80% of all movies are ADR, which means all the things that they captured on set was re-recorded with the actors watching a screen, probably in a scoring facility.
In a booth.
Scoring booth.
Right.
The movie's on a big screen. They're watching their characters' lips move and they're re-recording their lines, okay?
One of the biggest uses of this more recently is The Dark Knight Rises.
Okay.
Tom Hardy's Bane. It was so hard to understand his voice because he used an accent and he had a mask.
Yep.
His whole dialogue in the entire film was ADR.
Every time you see his character on screen, it wasn't the audio from the set.
Right.
It was
he had to re-record
voiceover.
it in a booth.
Much like how they did Darth Vader in Star Wars.
Right.
Right? Which was a completely different actor. These guys are introduced to each other. They quickly get into a cab after this altercation kind of gets heated.
Yeah.
Because the guys are all throwing things at the cab. The cab driver freaks out.
I wanted to talk to you about the cab thing because how many movies have we watched where a cop or some authority figure protagonist requisitions some civilian's vehicle and just takes off with it, which is completely illegal. Look this up. You can't do that.
So a lot of times in movies, they walk up to a civilian vehicle and they say, "I'm commandeering this vehicle,"
Right.
and that isn't a thing.
It's not at all. Sometimes they'll hold their badge up, or sometimes it's a big gun.
Yeah.
So of course the driver gets out, and it's usually a cab, or it's always some amazingly performing
sports car.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Like in Speed.
Right.
Whenever Keanu Reeves, commandeers that sports car, which is one of my favorite movies too. So they get in the cab, and what is Bruce Willis saying to Samuel Jackson's character? What is he calling him?
Jesus.
Yeah. So like 3 or 4 times,
Right.
he's like, Jesus.
Jesus, thanks for getting me out of there. Jesus, what's going on? Jesus. And then Samuel Jackson says, why do you keep calling me Jesus?
Yeah. Isn't that your name? And he's like, no, they were calling me, hey, Zeus. As in, he goes through the whole big monologue about his name and how it's like, if you mess with me, I'm going to, if you mess with me, I'm going to throw a lightning bolt up your ass.
Yeah.
Zeus,
Every line he says is one of those iconic Sam Jackson lines.
Absolutely, man. He can yell like no other.
Right?
I think, and this may be a real thing. Does he have a masterclass on how to say curse words?
If he doesn't, he should. So, but to segue, a while back, I did tell you that I read an article. Sam Jackson started out with a speech impediment.
That's right.
And in order to get over it, he threw in curse words.
Right.
To
We
get
talked
over
about
it.
this in the other podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how he got over it. And so,
Right.
so it's one of the most iconic things that he's known for is if he's in a movie that he doesn't cuss, it's like, what's up with you? What's up with this movie? That's not right.
All right, so we've that scene. We've talked about how the characters have met. We quickly see their chemistry, right? We quickly see how well or how not well they're going to work together,
Right.
Right, and it takes them a while to kind of get in a groove, but they both immediately learn that they are a team. They were thrown together to fight this villain and go on these wild goose chases, as Bruce Willis' characters alludes to in the movie.
I think at this point, I think we've given the listeners enough detail into why we love the movie, what it's about, some of the different aspects of it to entice them to go see if they haven't seen it. Which, if you haven't seen it, this movie's 25 years old. What's wrong with you?
Why? Yeah. First of all, why haven't you seen it? It's been out for so long. What's cool about this is like when I watched this movie this week, a year to the day.
So crazy. Too.
I was watching it that same night.
I saw your Facebook story. Yeah.
And sometimes that's kind of why I post the way I post on social media about watching a movie, is because I do have movies that I return to every year.
Right.
You know, like Shawshank Redemption or Good Will Hunting or
Back to the Future.
Back to the Future, of course. The Die Hard movies, Jurassic Park. You know, I could keep going and keep going. And I love to go on my memories and go, oh, I was watching that movie today. Let's watch it right now, you know, or whatever.
Right.
You know,
so it's a good reminder to say, oh, it's time to watch this, you know.
I also have an affinity for watching movies on the day of release. Like a few days ago, or last weekend, I watched Almost Famous.
Right.
On the day of release, and it was like the 20th anniversary of that movie releasing. That's always fun to do, right? Okay, let's get into our categories, and go ahead, Mike, and talk about some of our categories.
Okay. One of my favorites is actors in the film. What is their best movie? Was it this one that we covered? Was it something before, something after? Why was it their best? Another category that I think we're looking forward to discussing is, can you take a character from this movie and put them in a different movie, and then how does that change the dynamic? We have a few other categories as well, but I want to just give you a laundry list. I'll just start off with the first category, actors in the movies they've been in besides this, and if this one is their best movie. Jeremy Irons as the villain. I'll admit I'm not that familiar with his filmography, so I would have to say this is his best movie to me.
Well, if you look at IMDb, Jeremy Irons' big film, the biggest one, is called Dead Ringers in 1988, which I never saw.
Wow.
However, you cannot forget his performance in The Lion King.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So The Lion King came out the year before this movie was released. 1994 was when The Lion King came out, and he played Scar, which is a pretty big character in that movie, in that story.
You know what? I would say probably one of the best all-time villains in cinematic history.
So if you think about this cinematic atmosphere, you had just seen Lion King, you had just heard his voice, and Die Hard starts with you not seeing Jeremy Irons' character for a little while, right? We hear his voice on the phone.
But he has a German accent.
He has a German accent.
Right.
And then you know, whenever the FBI agents are sitting in the van and they're showing him the pictures,
Right.
John McClane the pictures, and which is a great scene. Right.
It's the reveal. It's the big reveal of who Simon is.
It's the big reveal of when we learn about Hans Gruber being Simon Gruber's brother and what Bruce Willis did. And one of the cops that's working with on the same force as Bruce Willis, he's like, that thing in L.A.
Right.
At the building, Nakatomi Plaza or whatever, you know.
So that makes me wonder, does this movie ignore Die Hard 2? Because they go right to...
They don't really talk about... I don't know if they ignore Die Hard 2, but they don't allude to it. But they do talk about the first one.
So my thing is, why would saving a tower in L.A. be more memorable than saving an airport?
You know what? Maybe we'll just say right now they probably ignore
Okay,
Die
yeah,
Hard
okay,
2,
okay.
just like we have over the
Yes.
years.
Okay, another one. He's Alfred in Dawn of Justice.
Oh man,
Yeah.
so yeah, pretty iconic role for him. So that's Jeremy Irons, but Samuel L. Jackson, man, what do you think his most iconic role is?
Honestly, I'd say Mace Windu from Star Wars.
Really?
I think so. I mean,
You
think about it. He's got the purple lightsaber. No one's ever had any other color besides red or blue, green.
Right.
And now we have purple all of a sudden.
Right.
Everybody's like, what's up with this purple lightsaber? And he requested a purple lightsaber.
It's a pretty big role for him. Do you think it's the most iconic?
He just stands out. And I don't want to say because he's the only black guy in the film.
Right.
But, I mean, for other reasons,
Right.
he's just as knowledgeable as Yoda is in those movies. I mean, him and Yoda are connected at the hip in this trilogy.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, I guess you could say Nick Fury, but he has
Nick Fury,
those are bit parts in those movies.
large role in the MCU. Not really a lot of screen time as Nick Fury.
But he probably
Collectively, there is.
Yeah, he's in more of the MCU movies than other more popular characters.
Right.
But just smaller parts in each one.
I really think that in my mind, the biggest role for Samuel L. Jackson
I know what you're gonna say.
is Pulp Fiction.
Yes.
Yeah. And then right behind that, in my mind, is Jurassic Park,
Oh my gosh.
which was 2 years before this movie, I think. You know, he was in one of my favorite M. Night Shyamalan movies,
Oh,
Unbreakable.
right.
Which he had never played a role like that before.
That was an interesting role.
That was
Mr. Glass.
which was also with Bruce Willis.
I read an article maybe a couple of years ago, so I'm sure it's updated since then. But if you take the totality of his filmography,
Mm-hmm.
they've all grossed most all time out of any
Really?
yeah
So
any actor.
high grossing films that
Yeah,
he's been in.
because he's in every movie he's in is a big movie.
Think about it, Jurassic Park,
Yep.
massive movie.
He's in franchises,
Yeah.
so they make a lot of money.
Right.
But yeah, so Bruce Willis,
Bruce Willis started out as a stand-up.
which is unbelievable to me.
Yeah, like he did a lot of comedy roles on television for a long time.
Moonlighting is
before
my,
he went and transitioned into the big screen, right? And Die Hard is his biggest movie.
which is crazy to me.
Yeah,
to
that's
think.
his most iconic role.
Yeah,
Really. Pulp Fiction being his second.
yeah, I would have to
Yeah.
say.
So, and again, that's why he suggested Samuel L. Jackson be in this movie with
Right.
him to the director, which can have a lot of brevity. And like you say, so you're a pretty big actor. You know, at this time, '95, Bruce Willis was a pretty big actor. And since John McTiernan directed the first, I don't think he directed
He didn't
the
direct
second.
the second one. He directed the first and the third.
Die Hard 2 was directed by Rennie Harlin. And Rennie Harlin, he was an action movie director at the time. He produced Cliffhanger. He directed Deep Blue Sea.
Oh my gosh. Oh, Samuel L. Jackson.
Samuel L. Jackson. He directed a bunch of foreign films. But going back to Bruce Willis and John McTiernan, you're a pretty big time actor, and you can suggest your people who are acting in your movies with you. And John McTiernan listened, and it was a good suggestion.
Great fit.
Right.
I love those buddy movies like that.
Dude,
where
I
you
do
team
too.
Like it's very reminiscent of Lethal Weapon.
Yeah. Oh.
How great those
Which
two
we are
guys play.
definitely going to talk about Lethal Weapon.
Have to.
I love those movies.
Yeah.
I want more. I hope they make more. I doubt they're going to make more. They're probably going to reboot it because that's what Hollywood
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
But I love the Lethal Weapon movies. But buddy cop movies,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
I do have one complaint about this movie. Probably the biggest complaint is there's a spell in the middle of the film, maybe towards the beginning of the second act, where they focus primarily on the terrorists and their plan.
Yeah. So
And the movie shines when it's Sam Jackson and Bruce Willis on screen
Of
together.
course.
So you take the screen away from the
course.
camera away from that. There's a lot of dry spells and moments where I remember thinking this movie kind of drags now.
yeah, there was a lot of scenes that didn't necessarily need to be in the movie.
Right.
It could have just been suggested or understood that these things were happening. Like when, what do bad guys do? They steal things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We don't need to see them doing it.
And one thing I caught is the very first time both Sam Jackson and Bruce Willis are speaking to Simon, John McClane says something that kind of rattles Simon on the phone. He starts to stutter. It's like
Yes.
and
And the psychologist is in the room, and he's
Yeah.
like, "Oh,
so my thing was it reminded me of like old school Bond villains, they always have some kind of tick or something that you
Yes.
notice. And if you think about it, his right-hand man, that henchman, was a big dude. I think his name is Targo in the movie. Big guy, doesn't say much, but he's the muscle.
Right.
Very reminiscent of Jaws from the old
That's
James
true.
Bond movies.
That's true.
So it had a lot of James Bond-esque type villains and
Right.
and that type of thing.
Right.
What's up with the tech or the bomb experts in these movies and TV shows? They're always like the quirky, eccentric, excited to figure out how a bomb works, or the hacker, how to hack into this
Right.
unhackable, site. The guy that first comes in talking about the bomb and how it mixes,
Yeah.
he's thrilled. It's like Christmas for him.
So excited. I'm so glad you brought this up because like he's one of my favorite characters in the movie.
Yeah.
We don't get to see a lot of him.
No.
But he's so eccentric and has a lot of energy. And this is the character that I think that I would take out of this movie and put somewhere else. I don't know. I don't know where I'd put him.
Right.
But I wanted to see more from that
And you
character.
think he's gonna die at the end because he's in the school
Yeah.
with the bomb.
Yes.
And then the bomb, shoots
Mixes.
out. It's like mixes, and he's like,
Yeah.
oh, because the reason that happens is because they tell him there's still kids in the school.
Right.
Who are the kids?
Those two little boys, the nephews of
Which is insane to me.
it is insane, but at the same time, you're like, this is important. You
Right.
know, this is why these scenes matter.
Right.
Right?
These scenes matter, y'all. These scenes matter. Hashtag it.
All scenes matter.
All scenes matter. Here we go.
Hashtag part of the problem.
This is how we segue into your dream. When you say all
Oh,
scenes matter,
man,
please tell the listeners what you told me off air.
Man, my dream last night was so weird, but it also ties into our conversations,
Right.
And what's going on with the world. So I had a dream, which was probably induced by alcohol, but this dream was me, and you were upset with me. Me and you're upset with me, and I remember the words I said to you. In distress, I said to you, I just want to understand.
Right.
And it's alluding to the fact about Black Lives Matter and all of that, which has just been on my heart, on my mind, a lot in the last few months.
And over the last few months, we've discussed it often.
We have, and the truth of the matter is, I do want to understand. I said that line to you, I'm running away from you, you're visibly upset. It's crazy, and I don't remember, there was no resolve. I just remember these bits and pieces of that dream.
Yeah.
But I do remember the heaviness, and I do remember the feelings that I felt.
Which is insane to me that that's the dream you had, because in my mind, just because of the dynamic of our relationship over the last decade, I don't ever see myself getting to that place with you where I'm so upset that you can't calm me down. When all you say to me is you want to understand, I'm the guy that wants you to understand because you're one of my best friends. And I feel like I'm not doing my job or duty as one of your best friends if I don't try to help and educate you. So I couldn't see myself ever getting to that. And I've thought about that, and I'm thinking, what scenario, because as a writer, I'm always creating in my head.
Sure.
So I'm thinking to myself, what scenario realistically could happen where...
Led you to that point.
And I could never come up with anything.
I mean, maybe things in the dream just got so bad that you were very, very upset, visibly upset.
Right.
And I was just trying to talk to you about it and understand.
And by the way, to piggyback off of this, some of you listeners out there that I'm friends with haven't reached out to me to say, hey, we want to understand. Brad's one of the few, so you guys need to jump on the bandwagon, reach out to me. You see my posts on Instagram.
Yeah.
Don't just hide in the shadows.
Yeah,
this is not the place for that anymore.
These subjects are super huge on both of our hearts and both of our minds.
Yeah, you can't ignore it anymore.
And we don't stop talking about them. And we want to have resolve. And we want things to get better.
And things can't get better until the hard conversations start. And we've started that, over the course of things that have been happening.
Right.
But I think it's a great moment between us to talk about that because you're white and I'm black, and then for this movie to be one of our favorites because it does deal with that racial issue. There's a 5-year gap between Die Hard 2 and 3.
Yeah.
At the end of Die Hard 2, Holly and John are in a great place.
Yeah.
Well, actually at the end of 1, they start to get to that place.
Yeah.
Because he goes to LA to try to reconcile with Holly, at a Christmas, corporate party of all places.
Right.
And by the end, they do reconcile.
She had invited him to come.
She did. So she wanted things to work.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So there was things we didn't know before this movie that were happening and that we later learned about.
Well, the thing was, Holly took the job in L.A.
And they moved away from each other.
Yeah. Right. So I thought it was interesting that, and they do kind of touch on this at the very end, where Zeus says, just pick up the phone and call her. And McClane's going on about how she's stubborn and, he's stubborn.
Right.
And so it's a dated moment, but he gives him a quarter to use a payphone. And I'm thinking, you couldn't find a payphone in 2020. If you do, it's obviously inoperable.
Yeah.
But he calls her, and she finally gets on the line. I don't know if it's really Bonnie Bedelia's voice or not, who plays Holly in the first two.
That's a good point. I don't know if they actually used the original actor, and it's we probably should look it up and see if she's uncredited for that role.
Because it was just that one brief, fleeting moment. But she finally does jump on the line, and McClane discovers something. I won't spoil what it is, but it's basically the way that sets up him taking down Simon in the end. And he drops the payphone, doesn't hang it up. He just leaves her hanging, and she's screaming, "John, John," and that's it. So they never actually reconcile. The next two installments in the franchise, Holly's not even mentioned, I don't believe. But their daughter's in the next one, played by
Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
Mary Elizabeth Winstead, yeah.
Right.
Which is another character I would have loved to see more of in that movie.
Sure. I mean, not only is she good to look at, fun to look at,
but she's a great actress.
because she's pretty. She was also a really good actress.
Yeah.
And we see her in other films later in her career. Bonnie Bedelia is not listed in this movie as Holly Gennaro.
And I wouldn't think so.
So they probably just used. They could have used audio from the first film or something like that to get that on the phone.
Right.
We barely even hear what she's saying.
So when they decide to make this cover story, the cops to put all the kids into a training exercise, they put all the kids. The entire school's in the auditorium.
Right.
What school have you ever been to where the entire student body can fit in the auditorium?
I mean, it's an elementary school.
Yeah.
So it's kind of smaller. And in that area in New York, there's probably lots of different options to take your kids to schools.
But that's not even my issue. The issue is when they cut to that scene, the teachers are making the students sing, row, row, row your boat.
Yeah. Like all the different parts of row, row, row.
And they repeat it over and over.
Right. And the nephews are like not enjoying it at all.
They didn't believe it. They knew something was off.
Yeah, and then the little one runs off. And he's like, where are you going? And they like go and play, cards or something in another room.
In another room, yeah. Oh, let's talk about an early version of the script I came across.
Okay.
So an earlier version of the script had McClane battle terrorists on a cruise line, but was rejected because it was too similar to Under Siege, which is a Steven Seagal film.
A really big Steven Seagal movie, which I actually enjoy. It's a good movie.
It's probably one of his best.
Yeah.
So the script was repurposed and turned into Speed 2 Cruise Control.
Which is a horrible movie.
Yeah. Even Keanu Reeves said no.
Yeah. Right. They used Robert Patrick.
Yeah.
Right?
Jason Patrick.
I'm sorry, Jason Patrick.
Jason Patrick ends with a C, not a K. I hate people named Jason Patrick with end with a C. I hate him. Can't trust him.
Okay, favorite scenes.
Just to generalize real quick, and then we can break them down. Any scene that Samuel L. Jackson and Bruce Willis are in.
I agree.
Because as you said earlier, the chemistry between the two of them, it's so good.
You can tell that they have on-screen and off-screen chemistry.
Yeah.
They work well with each other.
Right.
They have fun with each other.
They reminded me of, there's an old television show called, I think it's The Odd Couple.
Okay.
And it's about two old men who room together, but they're exact opposites, so they always butt heads.
Right.
This reminds me of that.
Absolutely.
The way these two are.
Absolutely.
But it's in a way where it's not annoying. It works really well. You want to see a movie just about the two of them.
And we see this archetype and these kind of characters work together in other installments of other movies.
Well, Lethal Weapon again.
Lethal Weapon, right. The buddies that are, like one's about to retire. He's really old and grumpy. Then you have the young gung-ho,
crazy a little bit.
Absolutely. Doesn't follow the rules. This very similar to this relationship.
Yeah.
Right? So one of my favorite scenes is when...
You know what scene's good because you laugh before you even describe it?
Absolutely. So I'm thinking about it in my mind, and it makes me react to that scene again. So it's when Bruce Willis's character is underneath he's in the aqueduct. Okay. And the water's filling up because they had the terrorists had like let go of the dam.
Yeah, they blew the dam.
And so all the water's flying through, and he's driving super fast in a dump truck. Which the stuff he was doing in that dump truck, I don't think it was actually possible.
But John McClane can do anything.
But whatever, John McClane has proven that he can do this. This scene is when Bruce Willis drives the dump truck underneath a part of the aqueduct that goes up to the surface.
Right.
And there's like a ladder hanging down. There's water rushing really fast. He climbs out, and this is where it becomes really heroic, right?
Of course.
He climbs out and he attaches himself to that ladder, and he's like, whoa, and like the ladder like flies up because the water pressure, and then he is projected up this tube,
right? And
he flies out, and this is why it's my favorite part. He flies out, and Samuel L. Jackson's driving by, and he's like, "Oh, there he is!" And he's like, "Hell of a way to flag a guy down," or whatever he says,
Yeah, that's a great scene. It's a great scene because it's so bad because it's impossible.
Right.
But then, way to flag somebody down. It's a great line to that. What happens?
Oh man,
it's really funny.
My other favorite scene is when Samuel L. Jackson's character walks up to a gold bar, and he's like, "Oh shit, is that a gold bar?"
Yeah.
And Bruce Willis is like, yeah.
They're not gonna let you keep it.
He goes, "I'm not let you keep it," and he goes like, "Oh man, it's heavy," And so he's carrying it with him, and that bit. They use that gold bar for a lot of different things.
Yeah.
They break into a car with it.
With the gold bar.
And then he forgets it.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, he's like, man, that was mine.
Yeah, because Bruce Willis says something about that guy's going to be pissed we took his car.
Yeah. So there's a lot of times in this movie when Zeus says, man, she's pissed. Man, that guy's pissed. Or whatever. There's a couple of iterations of that line.
Right.
And what you're talking about is when Zeus goes... I don't remember if Bruce Willis says that guy's pissed at you or if Zeus says...
I think it's Zeus. Because then McClane responds with, well, he'll be happy when he finds what's in the back seat.
Right. And he goes, oh, man, that was mine. So...
It makes me wonder, I bet a lot of the scenes with them, they had to have improv'd a lot of it.
Oh, yeah, and I think there's a lot of outtakes that I would love to see.
Same.
That happened during the filming of this.
Because I bet John McTiernan just said, you know what, you guys just go at it, we'll just keep recording.
Sure.
So,
sure.
I love the ending.
After
McClane figures out...
There's two endings.
There's an alternate ending.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that because I read about the alternate ending and I've seen it. It's like a deleted scene. I think I saw it on YouTube.
Okay.
It's...
I haven't seen it.
It's dark.
Is it?
Yeah. So basically, Simon gets away in this alternate ending. He gets away. McClane loses. Something he's not accustomed to, obviously.
Right.
Months later, he's off the force. Holly's left him. He's even worse off at this point than he was in the beginning of the film.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Just down in the dumps, can't catch a break. Somehow, months later, tracks Simon down in Hungary, Germany, or Europe. Coaxes him into playing Russian roulette with a rocket launcher.
What?
With the sights taken off, so you don't know which end the rocket's going to come out. So with a gun pointed to Simon's head, he said, "We're gonna play Russian roulette with this," and Simon pulls the trigger and blows him away. But they decided that scene was too dark. McClane.
They were going to end the franchise
with that.
With that ending?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
They thought it was too dark for the McClane character. He wouldn't go out. He's not a guy that seeks vengeance. He seeks justice. Right. So they said that we can't use that.
Right.
But I love hearing these stories about these deleted scenes because it makes you think.
That's a completely different ending.
Yeah.
And that's where the franchise would have ended, obviously.
Yeah. You couldn't make the next two Die Hards if that's how this one ends.
Let's talk about franchises.
Okay.
The idea and the concept of making a standalone movie have more sequels or actually writing a franchise. You have different ways to approach this, right? You have the MCU, which was all written and planned out for years.
A whole decade.
Which was, in my mind, just brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay. Then you have movies that Die Hard was based on a novel.
Yeah.
And the story and the characters and stuff. And I don't even know if they planned to have more come out. So at the same time Lethal Weapon is happening, that turned into 4 movies.
Right.
Die Hard comes out, that turns into 5 movies.
Unfortunately.
So action movie franchises were kind of a thing. Bad Boys releases this year. That turns out to be 3 movies.
Well, it already came out. It came out in January.
So earlier this year is
Yeah.
when in '95 is when Bad Boys
Supposedly
releases.
the 4th one is planned.
Right.
I'll say this about franchises. As a whole, I'm not a fan because I think it's just Hollywood's way of trying to milk the cow for everything it's got.
Right.
And a lot of times when that's your main motivation, I mean, you don't really get a lot of good sequels.
So, and that's a good point to bring up because I think this is probably the best sequel in the franchise.
I think so too. I
And
agree.
sequels don't always hold up to the first one. Aren't always as good as
It's
the first
rare.
one.
It's
rare. Some of the MCU movies, you can't really even call them sequels because they're, even though it's a continuation of the previous film.
Right.
In that sense, it is a sequel, but they're pretty much standalones.
Yeah, that's true. I can only think of maybe 10 sequels that are superior to the first, or even maybe even the second. Well, that would be a threequel if you're talking about 3. But if we're talking about just strictly sequels, there's not that many. I mean, Dark Knight is one that's far superior.
It's far superior.
Terminator 2.
Yeah. Which is the one I watched the most.
Yeah, and that's not to say that the first one isn't great as well, because if you don't have the second one without the first.
Right. And we're going to talk about in a future episode Terminator Salvation, which is the 4th movie in the franchise. But it actually is more of a standalone. And we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Is this John McTiernan's best movie? Is this better than Die Hard?
So you know what? I'm going to have to oppose what you say. I love the first one as the best one. Because it goes back to what I just said. You don't get these other movies without the success of the first one.
You have to have the first one.
Yeah.
Right. And what I mean by when I say that this is my favorite one, the first one I love the most.
Yeah.
This is my favorite of the sequels.
Okay.
I should have clarified that.
Okay.
And there's the
I like that.
There's the clarification.
That's a good
The
cleanup.
first one's my favorite.
Yeah.
This is my favorite sequel.
I think as a purist, it just makes sense to say the first one is my favorite.
Right.
Like if you think we're talking about franchises again, the original The Fast and the Furious. You don't get 1 through 7 or 2 through 7 without the first one.
Yeah, you got to start somewhere, right?
Which is completely different from what those movies are now.
So you don't think Too Fast, Too Furious is a good one?
No. You know what? I hate to say that because that's the John Singleton directed film.
Yep.
It's our introduction to Tyrese.
John Singleton's great.
Yeah. Rest in peace. Also.
Right.
But I love the again we're talking about banter between 2 characters, Paul Walker and Tyrese.
Man.
They act like best friends in this movie, but they're fighting, going at each other.
Yeah.
But then I've seen behind the scenes clips and they're just like best friends on the set.
Well, I mean, one of the most important tropes in a movie script is what? Conflict.
Yeah.
Right.
Every time.
I mean, conflict is a part of everything.
Right.
Right. And it can be shown in many different ways.
That's why Die Hard with a Vengeance is a good example because it's a dual conflict. You have a conflict between Sam Jackson and McClane.
Right.
And then you have a bigger conflict, those 2 against the terrorist.
Right. So I like to talk about the score. Now, Michael Kamen composed this score. He's one of my favorite, rest in peace, Michael Kamen, one of my favorite composers, because he did a live album for Metallica.
Oh, wow.
And it was called S&M, and Michael Kamen conducted that. And once I learned about who Michael Kamen was, which is probably around the time of that album released, I went backwards and I listened to more Michael Kamen scores. So I would tell the listener to do the same thing. His scores are really good. And in fact, I listen to movie scores a lot. I just put on a movie score. I won't listen to a movie score if I haven't seen the movie.
Really? See, I'll do that.
Because it's like a spoiler. Because I'm sitting in a movie, for instance, when we were watching Tenet the other day, I was like, man, this score is good.
Right.
And we're sitting in the movie and I pull up IMDb on my phone and I look up who did the score, and it's the guy who did The Mandalorian, and it's the guy who did Black Panther.
Creed also.
He did Creed.
Yeah.
And so, and since I've already seen the movie now, I love to listen to that score. It's really good.
You know what's funny? So I'll sample the score before I watch it.
Right.
And after I've seen it and go back and re-listen,
Right.
it hits different after you've seen it because you
True.
see where it was placed in the film.
True.
No, but if you're talking about scores that it can be spoilers, one that isn't is the original, the Batman Begins score.
Yep.
Every title is a different type of bat.
Yep.
So it doesn't spoil anything.
Right.
Now, if you listen to The Dark Knight, every title is like Agent of Chaos.
Sure, like
or, Why Do We Fall?
what the scene's about.
Yeah,
right.
so most scores do give it away.
Right.
So I agree with you in that
Another
sense.
point to bring up is that in the 90s, movie scores weren't released on CD very much. You couldn't find movie scores except for big movies. I had the Braveheart movie score, and I've returned to it a million times.
Okay.
I have the Jurassic Park score. I've returned to it a million times. So thinking about Batman Forever was a soundtrack and not really a score that was released.
Right.
There was a lot of bands that were asked to do music for the soundtrack, which was a big deal in the 90s, to get a band to write a song about a movie. I love movie scores. I love them. Sometimes I love them even more than the movie itself. There's a movie score I return to a lot, which is the movie score for Incredibly Close. What is it? Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close,
yeah.
Which is about 9/11. But the score is one of my favorite scores, and there is a lot of piano-driven songs.
Who composed that?
That movie was scored by Alexandre Desplat.
Okay.
And I don't even know if I'm I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name
But you put
correctly.
that European
Alexandre Desplat. But
enunciation.
he did some of the
Harry Potter movies.
Harry Potter movies. He did Argo. He did The King's Speech.
Didn't he do The Sentinel with Michael Douglas?
I think so. He did The Shape of Water.
Yeah.
So again, I love composers, so it's something we're going to be talking about on this podcast.
Yeah, just to kind of close that segment, a lot of the scores I listen to, I'll go back to just like my favorite pieces and listen to those over and over, or maybe like a segment in just the one piece, right?
True.
That I listen to. But yeah, scores, it's powerful because it does invoke emotion, because it takes you back to the moment in the film that you watched it when it was played.
There's a movie score that I return to a lot, which is a movie that was directed by your favorite director.
Michael Mann?
Yep, the movie is Last of the Mohicans.
Oh, yeah.
And that score is iconic. And there's one track on there that I will listen to over and over and over.
Okay.
And it's that main theme.
Right.
That first track.
Yeah.
And it's just it's bigger than life. It's so good.
You know what's interesting about Michael Mann films? So all of his movies that have soundtracks, no rap songs.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is interesting. But if you think about the movies he does, it wouldn't really fit. There's a Jay-Z Linkin Park mashup, the Numb mashup. I'm sure you've heard it.
Oh, yeah.
That's played in the intro of Miami Vice.
Right.
So it doesn't really count as a mashup.
That's true.
It's a great mashup.
Right.
Because I don't like either song separately, but together it's a different, thing. But yeah.
Let's talk about this movie trailer. This was a time when, in cinematic history, when movie trailers had the movie phone voice guy, right?
Yeah.
One man, this summer,
Right.
That stuff like that.
Right.
If you watch this trailer, which we wanted to include, but we're going to not so that we don't get in trouble. But this trailer is it's a pretty good trailer. It doesn't give away too much. It has that voiceover that was very iconic during the time. What are your thoughts on the trailer?
I love trailers that don't reveal too much.
Right.
Like you said, that was back then when you could get away with it. But now, to entice fans to go see your movie, they release 3 and 4 trailers, a couple of TV spots.
Yeah.
And with each trailer that's released, more is revealed.
A little bit more is revealed about the movie.
And I think
right?
it's because we're in a different climate as an audience.
Right.
Like we're living in a popcorn culture where we want everything now.
Right.
And a lot of people won't go to the movie unless they see these full 2.5, 3-minute trailers. But for people like me, I'm thinking, I don't want to see this now. I want to go see it on the big screen.
Right.
I remember watching the initial teaser for Inception. It didn't, no voice.
You knew nothing.
You knew nothing. And people next to me were thinking, why would I go see that? And I'm thinking, because it doesn't tell you anything, but it gets your attention.
Right.
And it gets your brain working.
Right.
And because we're such big moviegoers, people like that really piss me off. Made me so mad.
We've gotten away from using the voiceover in movie trailers.
Yeah.
I don't know when that happened, when that change happened. I want to say it was like probably early 2000s, maybe mid 2000s.
Yeah, I think around that time that guy died too.
Well, there's been several different
There have
ones.
been, yeah.
But you're right. He probably passed away, and we just got away from using that trope in movie trailers.
It's a lot of font now.
Yeah, it's like word. It's text on screen, or it's just a really well cut trailer that shows a few things with a stylized song that was probably written specifically for the trailer.
The trailer, yeah.
Or it's something that they've done here recently that I love is like, take for instance the new Dune trailer that was released a few days ago. They took a Pink Floyd song and they repurposed it and re-recorded it for the movie trailer for Dune. It's really cool.
That was the one we saw in front of Tenet, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That piece of music for that trailer fits perfectly to me. It was just as powerful to me as the visuals I saw in the trailer.
Excuse me. I think a lot of times they will start with a piece of music to put scenes, and sometimes the trailer editor is only given a few scenes to edit because the movie's still being produced, like they're still shooting while the trailer is being edited, so that it could come out very soon, so you can get something into the moviegoer's eyes about something exciting that's coming out.
One example I have of that I can think of right off the top of my head is the initial teaser for The Dark Knight Rises. That teaser was released an entire year before the movie came out. And the only scene that you see, it's an image of like the Dark Knight logo and some buildings and glass breaking and shattering, which does tie into the film,
of course,
if you've seen it. And it's just like a quick little couple of notes.
Right.
And the only scene you see is an over-the-shoulder of Bane walking up the steps while Batman's staggering back out of breath.
Right.
It's a powerful image.
Right.
And you see that, and it ends, and you're thinking, I got to see that when it comes out.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about some more favorite scenes. Did you have one?
Yeah, one that came to mind, the elevator scene, when John starts to kind of figure out something's off.
They allude to this, some numbers in the first of the movie.
Yeah,
right?
so one of the
lottery numbers.
One of the cop friends, or I can't say friends, but one of his cop guys.
Who was later killed.
Yeah, his badge is shown for a reason. His badge number is 6691.
It's 6991.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So his badge number is 6991.
Okay, you sure it wasn't 6691?
Nope, because I remember 69.
Okay, fair enough. So once the subway bomb goes off, that cop gets killed.
Okay.
And one of the terrorists walks by and takes his badge, and he's dressed up. By the way, the number of terrorists in this movie?
There are a lot of terrorists.
There are a lot. They're in every different area. They're in suits. Some are security guards. So these guys in suits walk up, and this one guy steals the dead cop's badge. They're in the elevator because McClane starts to figure out, is this a wild goose chase, all these bombs and these puzzles and riddles?
Yeah.
And so he sends Sam Jackson off to do this other thing, go to Yankee Stadium.
Right.
Because there's a clip in there about that.
Right.
And he approaches the Federal Reserve, and he's asking, just inquiring, anything weird happened today, da-da-da.
And obviously the guy that is not an American or doesn't work at that bank.
No.
He's totally posing.
Yeah, and he's like, well, actually, I was about to do my rounds. You want to come? And McClane's like, sure.
Yeah.
So they get in the elevator.
Oh, here's one of your guys now.
Yeah.
Walks up to the elevator.
Right.
And it's like, I think it's Otto.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
And there's like 3 or 4 of the guys in there with him, and they kind of get in front of McClane, behind McClane.
A giant one steps in.
He's huge.
Yeah.
And McClane's kind
of... And it's cramped.
Yeah, super small. And I have a thing about elevators, so that scene gets me.
Oh, okay.
When it's cramped.
Are you claustrophobic?
When it's cramped like that, yeah. But if it's just me, I'm cool.
Okay.
But I also have this weird thing where I'll get in the elevator and I'll jump. Not with strangers. Usually it's like my sister or somebody I'm close to, and they'll look at me like, don't do that again.
When do you jump?
As it's moving.
Okay.
I'm stupid. I mean, don't judge me, listeners. I'm sorry. So if you're ever in an elevator with me, listeners, you'll know that could happen. But anyway.
Just don't get in an elevator with Mike.
Yeah, get off. Take the next one. So anyway, he's in this elevator with these 4 terrorists, obviously you can tell. And he starts to size them up, and he sees one of the terrorists with that same badge that he knows his cop friend had.
Right.
So then he figures out, okay, these guys are going to try to kill me. How can I... This is how it happens in his head. You don't hear it, obviously.
Yeah.
It's the mythology. It's the methodology of McClane's brain.
Yep.
And so he starts asking about lottery numbers because earlier in the film, the original cop that died with the badge says he always plays the same number as his badge number.
Right.
Which I think a lot of cops really do in real life. I've talked to a couple of them.
Yeah.
And so he starts asking the room, the elevator, anybody know the lottery numbers from last night? Anybody?
And of course they don't.
Of course they don't, yeah.
And he knew that they did.
Yeah. And it's just a ploy.
Right.
And he says, my wife plays the same numbers all the time. I keep telling her, you're never going to win that way, da-da-da. And he reaches into his shirt, So I have him right here. He reaches into his gun and shoots the guy behind him.
Through his shirt.
Because it's McClane.
Yeah.
Because eventually it just ends up in a wife beater. That's what he has on anyway.
That shirt's got to come off anyway.
Right.
So.
And it's always ends up dirty.
Yep. Oh, it's so dirty. Yeah.
And this fight ensues, and it reminds me of the Captain America Winter Soldier elevator scene, which probably where they got it from.
Which they actually did. They did that scene several times in the MCU. Remember? They returned to that scene in Endgame.
Right.
Because they go back in time.
But it plays out differently, yeah.
Right, it does.
Yeah. Which is really funny how it plays out.
Yeah.
I won't spoil that because that's only 2 years old, so maybe people haven't seen it yet.
Right.
And again, it's 2 years old, you're in quarantine, what's wrong with you?
However, that's a time travel movie, which I love.
Oh, yeah, so it'll be covered for sure.
Yep.
So anything with time travel, if you haven't guessed, Brad's all in.
We're probably going to talk about.
And I'm all in too, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's probably one of my other favorite scenes.
That's cool.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to say is if you guys have a movie that you want to hear us talk about, it could be a movie we haven't seen, could be a movie we have seen, or maybe I've seen it and Mike hasn't seen it. Let us know. Send us a message on Facebook or on Instagram or comment on YouTube and let us know. Maybe we can cover one of those movies.
I saw a friend of mine, I won't just put her name out there, but none of my other friends probably know her, but she put out a name of a movie on Facebook.
Which was what?
The Notebook.
Which I don't know if I've seen the entire movie. I've seen scenes and I've seen, because I like the actors.
Right.
Rachel McAdams is one of my favorite because she's an attractive actress. I like to watch her movies. But it's got
Ryan Gosling,
who is a fantastic actor.
Yeah. So quick funny story about that movie. The first time I saw it is the only time I saw it. But the reason I saw it was my girlfriend at the time and we just got into a big fight.
Oh.
It was one of our first big fights.
Okay.
Of many. Eventually I learned my lesson 6 months later.
She's probably not listening.
No, we're not even friends anymore. It's fine. And so we're not talking, but I'm at her house. We're in a different city, so I can't just leave. And so we're just kind of sitting there stewing in the fight, not talking. And eventually she just puts on The Notebook as a way to bring me back to love.
Yeah.
I guess kind of thing. And I'm thinking, this ain't working. I hate this movie. I hated it because the mood I was in, I wasn't mentally prepared to see it.
Yeah.
And then when you get to the end and figure out what the twist is, I hated it even more.
One thing I wanted to make sure that you guys understand is we're not only going to cover action movies.
Oh, no, yeah.
We're not only going to cover guy movies. I am a big fan of romantic comedies or romance movies.
I think it'll be funny to have two guys cover a rom-com or a chick flick.
There's a movie that I told you that you need to watch because it's the script and the story is incredible, and it's called Playing by Heart, and it has a huge cast.
Right.
And we'll probably watch that together, and we'll talk about that movie.
Yeah.
All right, so Die Hard with a Vengeance. I recommend it to the listeners to go take a look at it if you haven't seen it.
And again, if you haven't seen it, what have you been doing with your life?
What have you been doing with your life?
You've been in quarantine for 6 months. Go watch Die Hard. It's on Netflix. No, it's not.
No, it's not.
It's
I watched it on HBO Max.
HBO Max.
So again, thank you to my friend who gave me the login for HBO Max. They have the first 3 Die Hard movies on there, not all of them.
Right.
And I went and I watched it on there. So thank you for joining us. Is there anything else we want to talk about before we go?
No, thank you to the listeners who listened to the intro pod. Again, we do appreciate the feedback we received. It was encouraging for us.
Absolutely.
The positive feedback we got. I got some critiques from people, and hopefully I fixed those issues. If I didn't, they'll let me know.
Yep.
But just keep following all the pages, keeping up with us. Keep sharing the feeds. And
we're having some trouble with Spotify. If you've had some trouble with Spotify, I don't know what the problem is really. I know that it's on Spotify. You can search for it. Sometimes you can find it. Sometimes you can't. But I think with this next episode, it'll kind of fix some of those problems, and there'll be more of a reason to click on subscribe. We are on YouTube. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. Hopefully, you've seen all of our social media content, and hopefully you keep listening.
And also Podbean.
So I have been Brad.
And I have been Mike.
And I thank you for listening to Beards and Flix.
Brad.